Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, the slow show, if there's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change serves as an economic for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to, to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Something's going on with this program. It ain't right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, the slogan show, if there's power in the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC is an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historic black colleges and universities, to utilize black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American owned men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest today, but you know, if you join us all on a regular basis, that we are always looking under our news blog and doing research to bring you news that you can definitely use. And today we're going to discuss on this platform, Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. We're going to talk about the recent bill that was passed through the House. Hopefully, this bill will be turned back in the Senate, but we don't know that as of yet. But we're going to look at the devastating impacts of this bill that passed the House the other evening as the GOP attempts to play havoc with the working class and middle class of America. And we're going to look at a very, very interesting article that was done by a young man by the name of Mata, last name Marzic, Mrkusic. And it was published on May 21st of 2025. Now, this article was done and published in an online news blog called Evergreen Action. And this specific article goes on to talk about the 7 ways that the tax bill will drive up household costs here in the US. House Republicans and President Trump are trying to jam through a disastrous tax bill in the coming days. It passed the extreme legislation that would take a sledgehammer to life savings programs and tax credits that credit jobs and provides health care, food assistance, and affordable clean energy to everyday Americans. Make no mistake about it, the GOP's bill is designed to give massive tax breaks to billionaires by taking money out of the pockets of everyday Americans. Here are some of the 7 ways the Republicans' sweeping tax bill is expected to drive up the cost and eliminate economic opportunities for average Americans. Now, this is a very, very interesting article, ladies and gentlemen, because it reinforces a number of things that we've been beating the drum around here on the platform of Solar Now and the Future as its economic impact on Black America. And the first thing we're going to look at is transportation costs. The impact on households. This bill will raise the price of gasoline by 37% a gallon, over $200 a year for the average gas vehicle costs, and new electric vehicles will go up $70,500 plus a $250 annual fee for just owning the vehicle. It will also take away the $4,000 tax credit on used vehicles. Republicans will increase oil demand by eliminating the federal electric vehicle EV affordable programs. Fuel economy standards and tailpipe emission standards decrease efficiency and increase demand for gasoline and raise costs. For everyone, Republicans are also repealing the incentives for EVs, raising the price of new EVs by $7,500, which will eliminate the tax credits for new EVs, which is $7,500, and for used EVs, $4,000. So whatever you drive, gasoline powered or electric vehicles, Republicans are jacking up your costs. Now, when we begin to look at the issue of the Republican plan to increase gas and electricity prices, terminating all federal clean energy investments will increase electricity rates and raise the price of gasoline by between 25 cents to 37 cents per gallon, costing households more than $400 billion on energy over the next decade. Well, this author was Teron Higgins, Building an Economy and All Tracking Climate Change and Environmental Justice Budget. So this is a very, very interesting article that goes on to dig into this particular article, what are we doing? Investing in a stronger and more reliable economy? We must continue to invest in research, technology, and innovation in a manner to ensure participation that benefits communities that are too often left behind. Only through such approach can the United States remain at the cutting edge of increasing competitive global markets. Strengthening workers' power and economic mobility. We need to increase wages, reduce poverty among working class families, increase workers' power, and create pathways for economic mobility. Raising the floor for basic living standards, working toward a stronger and more equitable economy for everyone involves rebuilding, expanding, strengthening America's social safety nets, make more comprehensive eligibility and services, as well as more flexibility in how it can be accessed and used. So these are all good points. And he looks at the numbers. He talks about child care expenses push the estimated 134,000 families into poverty each year. So entrepreneurial startups and business formations are booming in the U.S. He looks at these different things that are spinoffs from the energy aspect of what we're talking about. And as we say, ladies and gentlemen, everything starts with energy, everything ends with energy. Now, when we look at the second item that's listed under the 7 ways that this bill will drive up the household costs for everyday Americans, number 2 is listed is the energy bills. And I have some statistical data, which is somewhat from 2024, which is somewhat eye-opening, which goes on to indicate that through a statistical analysis of actual households, payments toward utilities across 97 zip codes in the U.S. zip code, and this analysis and report was done by an organization called Insights. U.S. utilities market size and households spent in a report for 2024 reveals that Americans spent $451 billion in 2024. Now, that's a large piece of money. It also went on to say in this specific article that most American citizens, whether they be Republicans or Democrats or independents, feel helpless as it relates to the utility companies in this country because they have legal monopolies. With that being said, the impact of households, Republicans are raising electricity costs for American households by more than $110. They said the next year. That's already here. That's according to analysis from the Clean Energy Buyers Association. So there's a blue link. You click on that link. Repealing the clean energy tax credit would raise electricity prices for American families and job creators across the U.S. And it gives you a breakdown in terms of statistics and charts and graphs. The Clean Energy Buyers Association today released a study conducted by NARA Economic Counseling showing that repealing the federal clean energy technology neutral investment and production data tax credits would raise the average U.S. residential electricity prices by 7% by 2026, equal to an average yearly increase of more than $110 for average American residential homes. For American businesses, electricity bills would be increased by 10% by 2026 if the tax credits are repealed and costs likely passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices on goods and services. Additionally, repealing the credits would decrease availability capacity of the grid by 167 gigawatts at the time when generation is critically needed to support the 21st century of America and artificial intelligence and advanced manufacturing and crypto mining by data centers to win the economic race against China. Combating the cost of living crisis in American consumers and fueling the U.S. growth relies on more private investment in diverse menus and clean energy resources, said SEBA CEO Rich Powell. Maintaining the federal investment and production tax credits enables electricity producers, buyers, and their customers to supply an abundant amount of low energy resources. Weakening or repealing these provisions would do reprehensible mean higher electric costs for U.S. households, businesses, especially in the American heartland. Repealing the tech neutral tax credits would increase overall electricity rates because of the pressure placed on existing supply, increase prices for any additional supply. Put simply, without credits, the new marginal price for resources would go up, in turn meaning higher electricity prices in America. Midwestern and Western states' residential electricity prices would rise 12 to 10% respectively over the course of the next 4 years, the highest increases for many regions of the country. The investment tax credit and the production tax credit provide a tax cut for American innovation, clean energy resources, including nuclear, hydro, geothermal, biofuel, wind, solar. Without these tax credits, by next year, the average increase of electricity prices by both businesses and residential for lower 48 states would be at least 8.4%, which numerous states seeking double-digit price inflation because of the study offers of conservatism estimates that the electricity rate hikes could be even higher. Now, this is, a little boy said, this is past asinine when we begin to look at what is actually playing out in the marketplace as we look at who voted for what. Now, we know that Joe Biden's signature legislation was the Invest in America agenda, which is called the Green New Deal. And then you had the Build Back Better and you had the Inflation Reduction Act. Executive Order 140096, which created the Justice 40 initiative, which Trump has come in and played the race card, which created the 140098, which dealt with climate change domestically and abroad, and 1403,985, which created diversity, equity, and inclusion across all 6 federal agencies in contracting. We know that to demonize and to put that type of title to something that's not deserving had nothing to do with Black America. It simply spoke that 40% of the investment must go to low and moderate income communities across this country. You have Asian, Latino, Black, white, low and moderate income communities across this country. didn't have anything to do with specifically black folks. But the Trump administration has come in and used this as the clarion call to try to say to white folks, y'all need to vote against your own interests. And because of folks losing their minds behind President Obama's election in 2008 and 2012, going into 2016, and Biden being his vice president, him coming to winning the election in 2020 and having on his ticket the first African American woman, Kamala Harris, which as he stepped down, she became the candidate for the Democratic Party. Now, I am not a registered Democrat, I'm an independent, but I look at policy. And nobody can tell me that this tax bill serves any policy benefit for anyone who is not of the 1%. If you're not a billionaire in this country, you're not in the equation. So let's look at who's being affected by what's going on. Now, as we indicated in the article of who was going to benefit from what in this process, we knew that these things would come to fruition. And we talked about this, we're talking about the 7 ways that household costs will be raised by this so-called, he called it as I'm referring to is COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts coming straight at you. You know him as your president, Trump. He referred to it as the big beautiful bill. I refer to it as a nightmare on middle class and low and moderate income America's street. And that's what this bill is. When we begin to look at the time when Americans are already struggling to keep up with the higher electricity costs and gas utility bills, it is outrageous that the Republicans would rip away programs that would drive those costs down. As electricity demand continues to grow, clean energy is the fastest and growest and most affordable way to keep more power to the grid. And Republicans care, if they care about driving down energy costs, this is the last thing that they need to do. To reinforce what is being said in that statement by this author, when we begin to look at 2024, the U.S. Solar Power Industry Trade Association, SEIA, indicated in a report that 66% of all new electricity generated capacity added to the grid in 2024 came from solar. 600 gigawatts of solar power in 2024. This represents a substantial 33% increase from fiscal year 2023. Now, if we begin to start looking at wind, and we begin to look at some of the games that have been played in the natural gas industry, which is item number 3, listed in the 7 things that will drive in this bill that will drive up household costs for the American public. The impact on households could pay, it's saying $100 by 2050. Well, I disagree with that. I'm saying we're paying that already. Republicans rubber stamp a unconstrained amount of liquid natural gas, LNG reports. Republicans This bill allows corporations to simply cut a check to declare that their LNG exports in the public interest, particularly guaranteeing more gas exports. But recent studies from the Department of Energy projected that unconstrained LNG imports would cost the average household an additional $100 per year by 2050. I think that it's much higher than that. These rising costs would also extend the electricity generation and the manufacturing. I think we also have to look at the manipulation of the markets by the regulatory entities that regulate the energy markets here in the US. And one of those entities is called the PJM. And I'm looking at a report that was done in a news publication called PJM News. Now, PJM is an organization that's a regulatory body that controls 13 states, the District of Columbia, and the District of Columbia. It starts with parts of the farther northern end of North Carolina, state of Virginia, District of Columbia, state of Maryland, state of Pennsylvania, state of Delaware, state of New Jersey, state of New York, state of Ohio, and Illinois. They're all part of the PJM. In a recent article that was published, and you'll be able to find that on our news and events tab here on our platform, Positive Change, by logging on to our website at positivechangepc.com. You want to stroll down to an article that says, Consumer watchdog group accuses regional grid operator of overcharging Marylanders for power. Now, this hits close home to me because I am a Maryland resident. If you go on and look at this specific article, which was basically authored by Aman Arzar, it was published on May 1st of 2025. This particular article went on to say the following. The Maryland office of the People's Counsel, the state's consumer watchdog group, has filed two major complaints against regional power grid operators, arguing that its market and infrastructure planning rules are systematically overcharging Maryland's electricity costs to subsidize services and infrastructure benefiting other states. Now, this particular article is addressing the issue of data centers that are being built in Northern Virginia. One data center, based on one article that I read, can use as much energy to take to power 1 million homes. Data centers are very, very energy intensive. And we're going to look at another article that talks about 4 data centers that are being built in upper New York State and the impact it's having on the state of New York. But see, this is what people have to understand. It doesn't matter if it's built in Virginia, it impacts all 13 states and the District of Columbia because they all draw from the same wholesale markets, which the wholesale markets are set by the PJM. Going back to the article that this talks about, PJM decides against posting indicative capacity auction results. Now, this article is dated January 10th, 2023. PJM backtrack on positions, posting indicative results of the 2024-2025 capacity auctions on January 3rd in the face of stakeholders' opposition. Now, the stakeholders were the 13 states that we're talking about. Let's look at the article and the complaint that was filed at the Federal Regulatory Commission jointly with the state of Illinois, New Jersey, and Maryland's Office of the People's Counsel, which is the legal arm of the public service commissions in those states. The PJM interconnection for 2025-2026 auctions in July of 2024, prices surged to $269.92 a megawatt day, a staggering increase from a year earlier, 2023, of $28.92 a megawatt day in the previous auction. According to the complaint, the overall cost increase for the energy or gas consumers in the PJM region jumped from $2.2 billion to $14.7 billion in a single year, an unjustified spike in the expenses to customers. The grid services 13 states and the District of Columbia. Well, I just named those states and who's being impacted. These results reflect the PJM's consistent favoring of the interests of large corporations, utilities, and generators over the consumer's interest. The Maryland People's Counsel, David S. Slapp, said in an email in response to the back to Climate News and this reporter who was doing this article. Now, he went on to look at the fact that we are asking, which the Office of Peaceable Counsel of Illinois, New Jersey, and Maryland, that's the we I'm talking about. We are asking the Federal Regulatory Commission to undo the unjust results and direct PJM to reset the prices for the 2024 auction by correcting the same flawed rules. The Federal Regulatory Commission has already accepted the need to fix for future auctions, he added. If successful, the complaint would reduce projected customers' costs by $5 billion. The OPC office indicated in an email in comments, the PJM spokesperson, Jeffrey Shields, PJM has not acknowledged flaws in its automatic rules, adding that the rules for 25 and 26. Well, this is the same Shields that spoke when they asked them to post what their indicative costs back in 2022. By January. During the December 21st meeting, members of the committee, Senior Vice President in Market Research, Stu Blister, said the PJM intended to publish the results on January 3rd after filing a tariff change request with the Federal Regulatory Commission to add a mistake in the auction results. And the submission was filed with the Federal Regulatory Commission in February on December 23rd. Now, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania filed a complaint and was one of those stakeholders who was at the forefront leading the opposition concerning these wholesale rates. We were slated to be hit with an 800% rate hike for natural gas, which would have totaled $21 billion, which would have kicked in June 1 of 2025. Subsequently, the different utility arms such as Pepco, BG&E have filed with their local public service commissions for additional rate increase because the complaint that Governor Shapiro brought was joined by all 13 U.S. attorneys' offices and offices of People's Counsel for those 13 states and the District of Columbia, and they prevail and block this $21 billion rate hike, which was an 800% increase on natural gas. Now, let's tie this back to who's really pulling the strings on the Capitol and at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. If many of you recall, before the election, Trump called the CEOs of the gas and oil and coal companies and billionaire interests and investors and said, y'all put up $1 billion, get me in the White House. Y'all can do whatever you want to do. Well, all kinds of games have been played, ladies and gentlemen, but the data is the data. So what we're doing now is looking at natural gas and the role that it is playing in what crucial industries. Let's look at one called the AI and mining industry for cryptocurrency. That plays a major part in people's decisions on what they're doing and how they're doing it. And what we're talking about is this. Being that New York is a part of the PJM, you have to be conscious of the fact that this article, which appeared in Inside Climate News, New York Bitcoin miners are buying up power plants and communities are fighting back. This particular article was published on May the 12th, 2025. This article also went on to say, New York is home to 4 of the largest Bitcoin mines in the country, which consumes huge quantities of electric power and water to cool their servers. Farms emit clouds, emitting noise around the clock and floods the atmospheres with a conspicuous green gas and pollutants. In many cases, they are also driving near residents crazy. I'm probably within 1.5 miles of the facility, and I can hear it, said Irvin Robinson, a sociology professor at Cornelius University in Buffalo, who lives close to the Bitcoin mine near New York border in Canada. It's a low hum that just sort of sits in your ear. Bitcoin, the largest and most known cryptocurrency, is managed by a decentralized network of Bitcoin users, a network of algorithms assigns each transaction a unique random identifying code, which Bitcoin mines derived by operating powerful computers day and night, running an endless series of random numbers to break the code. Once the correct code is reached, configuring the transaction, which appears on the average across the network every 10 minutes, a Bitcoin miner receives 3,125 newly minted Bitcoins, each worth around $95,000, which is the fee for helping maintain the network and keeping it secure. The average use of these operations is very high, which means the price of electricity governs where these mines are located and they go. Some Bitcoin miners are attracted to New York for its cheap electricity. Many northern towns that border Canada have low rates due to abundance of hydropower, but others are enticed by the state's decommissioned and low use power plants, which they buy and connect with computers and retrofit with gas turbines. Running this power plants all day, every day, two different Bitcoin mines have set up their operations in northern New York towns. Ladies and gentlemen, that's very, very key, because you get two purposes with data centers. You get AI, which we know that is artificial intelligence. I call it artificial ignorance, but it is what it is. And then you have mining for cryptocurrency. The other third pendulum that drives the energy cost in these markets is called the hemp industry. And in 2018, the not the hemp industry, but the cannabis industry. In the cannabis industry in 2018, the industry was supposed to be had a value of $1.9.8 billion in value in the cannabis industry. They spent about $10 million for electricity. But in 2024, through the cannabis industry data, which is put out by an organization based here in Washington, D.C., Frontier Data, which collects the industry information in the U.S. and worldwide, is that the industry is worth $38.5 billion in local sales. That's a hell of an increase in value. And projected by 2030, it will be 76.39 billion by 2030, fueled by legalization and power generation in growth industries. That means the cost of growing the cannabis in controlled environments, known grow facilities, which is also putting a great demand on the grid. So with these three growth industries really taking off in the PJM market region between Ohio, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, and Virginia, when you begin to look at your workforce markets of higher incomes, you will find that you have your larger municipalities like Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Maryland, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Newark, New York, Buffalo, Trenton, Cleveland, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Chicago, your major markets as it relates to people living in those urban and metropolitan areas, and the demand with some 65 million in population and growing. Okay. So when we begin to look at this and look at where the growth is, where the energy is going, these are the things that we have to take in consideration. Now, as we go back to our original article, and we're looking at the 7 things that this bill, 7 ways that this so-called sweeping tax bill will do to raise household costs in the U.S., it's very clear, ladies and gentlemen, that after natural gas, you're talking about home energy efficiency upgrades. The impact on households hoping to save money by making your home more efficient, the GOP is making that more expensive too. Right now, households can leverage the energy efficiency home improvement tax credit for improvements like heat pumps, water pumps, saving up to $990 a year on utility bills. But the GOP eliminates the energy efficiency home improvement tax credit at the end of this year. That's in the tax bill. They're taking that away. So if you have a new energy efficient refrigerator, stove, washer, dryer, you could get a tax credit right off on these things. Heat pumps, they've taken that away. Number 5, insurance and housing damages. The impact on households' insurance premiums will skyrocket and people will lose their homes due to worsening climate change. Now, I don't have to say, with DOS running through the federal government, firing federal employees, can we say NOVA, the National Oceanic, based in Silver Spring, Maryland, very close to me, where those scientists and engineers, you can't just get rid of these people. They're the ones who sent up the test balloons to test the weather, to tell you what it's going to be on your weather. Now, if you're going to have data centers that you're building all over the country, and then you cancel the mapping for at the Department of Energy, which shows what the conditions are near these manufacturing and these power plants, and the type of carcinogens that are going up in the air, contributing to global warming, then you get the impact of much stronger storms earlier and more consistent. And we're talking last week, 82 people dead. So it's not like I'm talking about something that I'm just making up. This article goes on to say clean energy tax credits and other historic programs in the Inflation Reduction Act were designed to drive down climate pollution, but the GOP law would increase climate pollution and functionally repeal much of the large climate investment package in U.S. history, which is what Biden did with the Inflation Reduction Act. He invested $1.7 trillion, the largest in U.S. history. Climate change already poses a serious threat to the housing markets. The analysis from the First Street predicts insurance premiums will raise dramatically, and foreclosures caused by extreme weather linked to climate change could spike insurance premiums by 380% in the next 10 years. Wait a minute, bro. 380% for homeowners insurance? Measuring hundreds of thousands of people could lose their homes. Repealing clean energy tax credits are a key. Clashing climate pollution will only heighten the financial risk to homeowners caused by the increase of fires, floods, and skyrocketing premiums. Okay? Now you're getting this from the platform of Solar Now in the Future with its economic impact on Black America. As the Black Eagle can say, we're making it plain so the goats can get it. Now, that's number 5. And we will be lucky to stay alive. Number 6, don't forget the grocery store. Because that is one of the promises that COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts make a promise that he was going to make groceries cheaper. Yeah, I'm going to make groceries cheaper. Okay, no problem. My man, COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts coming straight at you. The impact on households, the GOP is trying to cut $300 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program known as SNAP, which currently helps 42 million people across the country afford groceries. Do you hear what I just said? Republicans are taking a wrecking ball to the nation's largest anti-hunger program. These dramatic cuts would result in people losing food assistance and push many additional households into hunger. It comes right as the families are struggling with already high prices for groceries. Now, as I said in my podcast that I did earlier, that elections have consequences. And when I look at the fact that according to Mr. Ron Busby, who is chair, director, and head of the National Black Chamber of Commerce, and he didn't get these numbers from his or it came from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In 2023, the U.S. government spent for minority certified businesses $846 billion. $200 billion came off the top straight to the Pentagon, leaving $646 billion. Out of that, African Americans received 1.5%, totaling $10 billion, the most that Black folks we've ever received in the history of this country. Hispanics received 1.8%. Asian Americans and Filipinos and other ethnicities received 2%. 80% went to white women of $646 billion. And then folks went out and voted against their own interests. 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. 61% of white males voted for Donald Trump. 29% of Hispanics voted for Donald Trump. 16% of African Americans voted for Donald Trump. And he still lost the election. because they pulled and canceled 3 million votes, which Greg Palast has a video out talking about the Jim Crow tactics and how they basically took mail-in over 3 million mail-in ballots and disqualified them. So it didn't win the popular vote, but the folks that are in Congress right now talking about he got a mandate and they can pass this draconian bill, which he's calling the big, beautiful bill, which creates a nightmare on my street. Okay? Let's look at healthcare and Medicaid, the impact on households. The GOP will kick an estimated 10.3 million people off their health coverage and leave $7.6 million Americans uninsured, raising the cost for everyone. This is according to the data from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. If you're familiar with that group, they're right here in Washington, D.C. They crunched the numbers. So I ain't make none of this up. In what would amount to the largest Medicaid cuts in the program's history, the GOP is pushing to deny coverage to millions of Americans by imposing burdensome bureaucratic reporting rules, stricter and more numerous workforce requirements, and new eligibility restrictions. When people go uninsured, this raises the healthcare costs for everyone, and hospitals try to recoup costs for those who can't pay. In short, it reignites if the Republicans has a war on healthcare which will devastate millions of families across this country. But this is what y'all voted for. Now, I'm going to keep it moving on this platform, Solar Now in the future, with its economic impact on Black America. We ain't just saying this to get ratings. We're talking truth to power. And you can do what you want to do with it, because I didn't make none of this up. Now, when we look at the future harm to households and environmental justice issues, the impact on households, more local air pollutants means 350 more additional premature deaths each year and nearly 670 premature deaths by 2025. According to the latest analysis from Energy Innovation, which finds that the GOP sweeping tax bill will worsen both climate and air pollution, particularly those for plants and vehicles. The bill also gets rid of key pollution monitoring programs. That's what I was talking about. They had maps in EPA. They shut that down. Department of Energy, they shut that down, including those located by firing the people who ran the program. It's called somebody called DOS. Can you say Elon Musk? That's a joke. That sure enough ain't funny. Now, cutting those programs means we lose vital tools to measure the pollution poisoning of our communities, effectively hindering our ability to act. And green lights, because you need data. It's a green light for corporations to continue their long history of disproportionately harming communities of color and low-income communities unchecked and unchallenged. This tax bill will worsen the climate crisis, particularly for those low-income communities. The cost of extreme weather and other climate-related harms and disproportionately is leveled at working class people who typically have the fewest financial resources to respond to devastating impacts. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, I ain't make none of this up. News that you could definitely use here on the platform of Solar Now and the future with its economic impact on Black America. And with that being said, till next week, we say go in peace. as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with the uh, economic impact on Black America. Remember that this show is brought to you by the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC, which serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American owned renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education. This show is also brought to you by the Black Sports Legends Foundation, BSL of HBCU Solar Radio Talk Show Initiative, and you listen to that over our YouTube channel platform, the Positive Change online digital TV, radio, podcast network. Now, you can get all this information by logging to our website at positivechangepc.com. That's positivechangepc.com. Don't forget to click on that donate button because we're not the greediest, ladies and gentlemen, but we're simply the needy, and we need your help for real. And with that being said, whatever you can give. Ladies and gentlemen, until next week, we are saying, don't meet us back here, beat us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. So next